Now, President Clinton awards the Medal of Honor to 7 African Americans who served in World War II. Today at the White House, he and the soldiers' family members heard the story behind the soldiers' actions. Several of them died in combat. The event lasts 40 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Let us pray. We are humbled, gracious Lord, in the deeds of these quiet heroes whom our nation honors today. Their very lives proclaim the values we hold stronger than any philosophy espoused or creed confessed. Their personal heroism reflects all that we value, all that we cherish, all that we hold to be good and right and just. We stand in awe, dear God, of their sacrifice, and we have taken too long to recognize them. As we bless the ceremony with your grace and presence, smile again on these great heroes of our nation. May the legacy of their heroic actions be legends and models for generations to come. And may they and their families experience our gratefulness for their service to you and to our nation. Amen.
Secretary Perry, Secretary Brown, other members of the administration, General Shalikashvili and the members of the Joint Chiefs, General Powell, Senator Craig, Senator Kempthorne, Congressman Miller, the members of the families and friends of the medal recipients, and Mr. Vernon Baker. I'd like to begin by thanking Shaw University, its president, Talbert Shaw, and all the authors of the Shaw Study on the nomination of outstanding African American soldiers for the Medal of Honor in the United States Army during World War II. I also want to commend the Department of the Army officials, former and present, who commissioned this study and saw it through. Together, your support and painstaking research made this day possible. Without it, we would not be able to meet our obligation as a people to an extraordinary group of soldiers to whom we owe the greatest debt. Because of the hard work you have done, history has been made whole today, and our nation is bestowing honor on those who have long deserved it. 52 years ago, on an August day, Harry Truman stood where I stand now and awarded 28 Medals of Honor to veterans of World War II in the largest such ceremony ever held. President Truman described those medal recipients as a great cross-section of the United States. These men love peace, but are able to adjust themselves to the necessity of war, he said. I believe Harry Truman was one of our greatest presidents. He had not a shred of discrimination in his bones. He integrated the armed forces. But that day, something was missing from his cross-section of America. No African American who deserved the Medal of Honor for his service in World War II received it. Today, we fill the gap in that picture and give a group of heroes who also loved peace but adapted themselves to war the tribute that has always been their due. Now and forever, the truth will be known about these African Americans who gave so much that the rest of us might be free. Today we recognize 7 men as being among the bravest of the brave. Each of them distinguished himself with extraordinary valor in the famous words, "At the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty." In the greatest struggle in human history, they helped to lead the forces of freedom to victory. Their deeds remind us anew of the indomitable power of the human spirit, and they always will be remembered by men and women who cherish liberty. As recipients of the Medal of Honor, their names join the rolls of America's heroes, along with Sergeant York, Eddie Rickenbacker, Jimmy Doolittle, Audie Murphy, General Robert Foley, and Senator Bob Kerrey, and only some 3,400 Americans in the entire history of the United States. For these men, heroism was a habit. Reuben Rivers of Oklahoma was awarded a Silver Star while fighting in France in late 1944. A week later, he was terribly wounded when his tank hit a mine. Refusing an order to withdraw, Sergeant Rivers took command of another tank. He radioed in, "I see him, we'll fight him." And he kept on fighting until his second tank was hit and he was killed. Edward Carter, the son of missionaries, was crossing an open field in Germany when he was wounded 5 times. But Staff Sergeant Carter continued to advance, and when 8 of the enemy tried to capture him, he killed 6, took 2 prisoners, and brought them back for interrogation. In the face of overwhelming danger, they never wavered. As he led a task force in France, Lieutenant Charles Thomas was wounded by intense fire. While helping others to find cover, he was wounded again and again and again. But he refused evacuation until he had made sure that his forces could return fire effectively. While scouting a forward position, Private First Class Willie James was pinned down for an hour. But he made his way back to his platoon, planned a counterattack, and volunteered to lead the assault, and then was killed going to the aid of his wounded platoon leader. They were selfless. When Private George Watson's ship was attacked by enemy bombers over and over and over again, he helped others to make it to life rafts so that they might live, until he himself was so exhausted he was pulled down by the tow of the sinking ship. When the enemy surged into a town in Italy and drove out our forces, Lieutenant John Fox volunteered to remain behind in an observation post. He directed defensive artillery fire, and eventually he insisted that artillery fire be aimed at his own position. He said, "There are more of them than there are of us." The barrage he so bravely ordered killed him, and when our forces recovered the position, they found his riddled body among that of 100 German soldiers. One of these heroes is here today. In an assault on a mountain stronghold in Italy, Lieutenant Vernon Baker wiped out 3 enemy machine gun nests, an observer post, and a dugout. I must say that Mr. Baker has not quite abandoned doing the impossible. I learned before this ceremony that he is now 77 years young, but last year he got the better of a mountain lion that was stalking him. I was also very moved, as I'm sure many of you were, by the comments quoted in today's Washington Post, or last weekend, about Mr. Baker's creed in life. He was asked how he bore up under the lack of respect and dignity and honor after all these years. And he said, "Give respect before you expect it. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Remember the mission. Set the example. Keep going." Those are words for all of us. When Vernon Baker's commanding officer first wrote his award recommendation, he observed that Lieutenant Baker, quote, "desperately wanted the men of his company to hold their ground and was willing to sacrifice his own life in an effort to win our battle." That passage was never forwarded. When Reuben Rivers died, no award recommendation was made for the deeds we remember today. It was felt that the Silver Star he had been given already was reward enough for a black man. But when victory was complete in World War II, our government made a pledge to correct cases in which medals of honor were deserved but not awarded. Today, America honors that pledge. On behalf of the United States Congress, I award the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest military award, to Vernon Baker, Edward Carter Jr., John Fox, Willie F. James Jr., Reuben Rivers, Charles Thomas, and George Watson. A soldier who receives the Medal of Honor usually needs no further description. But we must remember something else here today. These heroes distinguished themselves in another, almost unique way. In the tradition of African Americans who have fought for our nation as far back as Bunker Hill, they were prepared to sacrifice everything for freedom, even though freedom's fullness was denied to them. We remember Edward Carter, who unsuccessfully requested combat duty for 3 years because until 1944, African Americans were not allowed into action. When his request was finally granted, it was at the cost of his sergeant's stripes, because an African American was not allowed to command white troops. Now those injustices are past. Our military is among the most integrated institutions in America, a beacon to society, and among the most successful, for America is stronger than ever. In the service of General Colin Powell, General Benjamin Davis, General Chappie James, and countless other outstanding African Americans, we see the enormous strength that America's diversity has given us. The men we honor here today helped to make their historic progress possible. They were denied their nation's highest honor, but their deeds could not be denied, and they cleared the way to a better world. Today, America is profoundly thankful for the patriotism and the nobility of these men, and for the example they set, which helped us to find the way to become a more just, more free nation. They helped America to become more worthy of them and more true to its ideals. To the families of the recipients who are gone, may you take comfort in the honor that has finally been done to your loved ones, and may God embrace their souls. And God bless you, Vernon Baker, and God bless America. Commander, post the orders.
The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded, in the name of the Congress, the Medal of Honor to First Lieutenant Vernon J. Baker, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. First Lieutenant Vernon Baker distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action on 5 and 6 April 1945. On 5 April 1945, Lieutenant Baker advanced at the head of his weapons platoon, along with Company C's 3 rifle platoons, towards their objective, Castle Agenolfi, a German mountain strongpoint. Moving more rapidly than the rest of the company, Lieutenant Baker and 25 men reached the south side of a draw some 250 yards from the castle within 2 hours. While searching for a position to set up a machine gun, Lieutenant Baker observed 2 cylindrical objects pointing out of a slit in a mount at the edge of a hill. Crawling up and under the opening, he stuck his rifle into the slit and emptied the clip, killing the observation post 2 occupants. Moving to another position in the same area, Lieutenant Baker came upon a well-camouflaged machine gun nest. He shot and killed both enemy soldiers. After Company C commander joined the group, a German soldier appeared from the draw and hurled a grenade which failed to explode. Lieutenant Baker shot the enemy soldier. Lieutenant Baker then went down into the draw alone. There, he blasted open the concealed entrance of another dugout with a hand grenade, shot 1 German soldier who emerged after the explosion, tossed another grenade into the dugout, and entered, firing his submachine gun, killing 2 more enemy soldiers. As Lieutenant Baker climbed back out of the draw, enemy machine gun and mortar fire began to inflict heavy casualties among the group of 25 soldiers, killing or wounding about 2/3 of them. Lieutenant Baker then volunteered to cover the withdrawal of the first group, which consisted of mostly walking wounded, and to remain to assist in the evacuation of the more seriously wounded. During the second group's withdrawal, Lieutenant Baker, supported by covering fire from one of his platoon members, destroyed 2 machine gun positions with hand grenades. In all, Lieutenant Baker accounted for 9 dead enemy soldiers, elimination of 3 machine gun positions, an observation post, and a dugout. On the following night, Lieutenant Baker voluntarily led a battalion advance through enemy minefields and heavy fire towards the division objective. Lieutenant Baker's fighting spirit and daring leadership were an inspiration to his men and exemplify the highest traditions of the military service. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded, in the name of the Congress, the Medal of Honor to Major Charles L. Thomas, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Then Lieutenant Charles Thomas distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action on 14 December 1944. One platoon of Company C, 614th Tank Destroyer Battalion, was designated as the leading element in a task force formed to storm and capture the village of Kleinbach, France. Lieutenant Thomas, the commanding officer of Company C, realized, with obscure information regarding the enemy and a complete lack of reconnaissance, the mission would be an extremely dangerous one. Fully cognizant of the danger, Lieutenant Thomas volunteered to command the selected platoon of his company and ride in the column's leading vehicle, a highly maneuverable but equally vulnerable M20 scout car. Lieutenant Thomas knew that if there was a concentration of enemy armor in the village, as was believed, he would absorb the initial shock of the first enemy resistance. The task force left Prusdorf, France, and proceeded to advance in column towards Kleinbach. Lieutenant Thomas and his scout car stayed well in front of the column. As his scout car advanced to an exposed position on the heights, he received intense direct fire from enemy artillery, self-propelled guns, and small arms at a range of 700 yards. The first burst of hostile fire disabled the scout car and severely wounded Lieutenant Thomas. He immediately signaled the column to halt. Before leaving the wrecked vehicle, Lieutenant Thomas and the crew found themselves subjected to a veritable hail of enemy fire. Lieutenant Thomas received multiple gunshot wounds in his chest, legs, and left arm. In spite of the intense pain caused by his wounds, Lieutenant Thomas ordered and directed the dispersion and emplacement of his first two anti-tank guns. In a few minutes, these guns were effectively returning the enemy fire. Realizing that it would be impossible for him to remain in command of the platoon because of his injuries, Lieutenant Thomas signaled for the platoon commander to join him. Lieutenant Thomas then thoroughly oriented him as to the enemy gun positions, his ammunition status, and the general situation. Fully cognizant of the probable drastic consequences of not receiving prompt medical attention, Lieutenant Thomas refused evacuation until he felt certain that his junior officer was in full control of the situation. Only then did Lieutenant Thomas allow his evacuation to the rear. Throughout the action, Lieutenant Thomas displayed magnificent personal courage and a complete disregard for his own safety. His extraordinary heroism spurred the soldiers of the platoon to a fierce determination to triumph and resulted in a mass display of heroism by them. Lieutenant Thomas's intrepid actions throughout the operation reflect the highest traditions of the military service. Accepting the award for Lieutenant Thomas is his niece, Sarah Johnson. I'd ask the guests please to sit for the remainder of the citations. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded, in the name of the Congress, the Medal of Honor to First Lieutenant John R. Fox, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. First Lieutenant John Fox distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism at the risk of his own life on 26 December 1944 in the Serchio River Valley sector in the vicinity of Sommo-Colonia, Italy. Lieutenant Fox was a member of Cannon Company, 366th Infantry, 92nd Infantry Division, acting as a forward observer while attached to the 598th Field Artillery Battalion. During Christmas night, there was a gradual influx of enemy soldiers in civilian clothes, and by early morning the town was largely in enemy hands. An organized attack by uniformed German formations was launched at 0400 hours on 26 December 1944. Reports were received that the area was being heavily shelled by everything the Germans had, and although most of the U.S. infantry forces withdrew from the town, Lieutenant Fox and members of his observer party remained behind on the second floor of a house directing defensive fires. Lieutenant Fox reported at 0800 hours that the Germans were in the streets and attacking in strength. He called for artillery fire increasingly close to his own position. He told his battalion commander, "That was just where I wanted it. Bring it in 60 yards." his commander protested that the bombardment would be too close. Lieutenant Fox gave his adjustment, requesting that the barrage be fired. The Germans continued to press forward in large numbers surrounding the position. Lieutenant Fox again called for artillery fire, with the commander protesting again, saying, "Fox, that will be on you." The last communication from Lieutenant Fox was, "Fire it. There's more of them than there are of us. Give them hell." The bodies of Lieutenant Fox and his party were found in the vicinity of his position when his position was retaken. This action by Lieutenant Fox, at the cost of his own life, inflicted heavy casualties, causing the deaths of approximately 100 German soldiers, thereby delaying the advance of the enemy until infantry and artillery units could be reorganized to meet the attack. Lieutenant Fox's extraordinary, valorous actions exemplify the highest traditions of the military service. Accepting the award for Lieutenant Fox is his widow, Arlene Fox. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded, in the name of the Congress, the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Edward A. Carter, Jr., United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Staff Sergeant Edward A. Carter, Jr. distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action on 23 March 1945. At approximately 0830 hours, 23 March, near Speyer, Germany, the tank upon which Staff Sergeant Carter was riding received bazooka and small arms fire from a large warehouse. Staff Sergeant Carter volunteered to lead a 3-man patrol to the warehouse, where other unit members noticed the original bazooka fire. From here, they were to ascertain the location and strength of the opposing position and advance 150 yards across an open field. Enemy small arms fire covered this field. As the patrol left this covered position, they received intense enemy small arms fire, killing one member of the patrol instantly. This caused Staff Sergeant Carter to order the other 2 members of this patrol to return to the covered position and cover him with rifle fire while he proceeded alone to carry out the mission. The enemy fire killed one of the 2 soldiers and seriously wounded the remaining soldier before he reached the covered position. An enemy machine gun burst wounded Staff Sergeant Carter 3 times in the left arm as he continued the advance. He continued and received another wound in his left leg that knocked him from his feet. As Staff Sergeant Carter drank from his canteen, the enemy shot it from his left hand, with a bullet going through his hand. Disregarding these wounds, Staff Sergeant Carter continued the advance by crawling to within 30 yards of his objective. The enemy fire became so heavy that Staff Sergeant Carter took cover behind a bank for approximately 2 hours. As 8 enemy riflemen approached Staff Sergeant Carter, he killed 6 of the enemy soldiers and captured the remaining 2. These 2 enemy soldiers later gave valuable information concerning the number and disposition of enemy troops. Staff Sergeant Carter refused evacuation until he had given full information about what he had observed and learned from the captured enemy soldiers. Staff Sergeant Carter's extraordinary heroism was an inspiration to the officers and men of the 7th Army, Infantry Company No. 1, Provisional, and exemplified the highest traditions of the military service. Accepting the Medal of Honor for Staff Sergeant Carter is his son, Edward Carter III. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded in the name of the Congress the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Staff Sergeant Reuben Rivers distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism in action during the 16 to 19 November 1944 while serving with Company A, 761st Tank Battalion. On 16 November 1944, while advancing towards the town of Goubling, France, Staff Sergeant Rivers' tank hit a mine at a railroad crossing. Although severely wounded, his leg slashed to the bone, Staff Sergeant Rivers declined an injection of morphine, refused to be evacuated, took command of another tank, and advanced with his company into Goubling the next day. Repeatedly refusing evacuation, Staff Sergeant Rivers continued to direct his tank's fire at enemy positions beyond the town through the morning of 19 November 1944. At dawn that day, Company A's tanks advanced towards Bulgatrov, their next objective, but were stopped by enemy fire. Captain David J. Williams, the company commander, ordered his tanks to withdraw and take cover. Staff Sergeant Rivers, however, radioed that he had spotted the German anti-tank positions. "I see him, we'll fight him." Staff Sergeant Rivers, joined by another Company A tank, opened fire on the enemy tanks, covering Company A as they withdrew. While doing so, Staff Sergeant Rivers' tank was hit, killing him and wounding the rest of the crew. Staff Sergeant Rivers' fighting spirit and daring leadership were an inspiration to his unit and exemplify the highest traditions of military service. Accepting the Medal of Honor for Staff Sergeant Rivers is Grace Woodfork, his eldest sister. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded, in the name of the Congress, the Medal of Honor to Private First Class Willie F. James, Jr., United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Private First Class Willie F. James, Jr. distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism at the risk of his own life on 7 April 1945 in the Weser River Valley in the vicinity of Lippoldsburg, Germany. On 7 April 1945, Company G, 413th Infantry, fought its way across the Weser River in order to establish a crucial bridgehead. The company then launched a fierce attack against the town of Lippoldsburg, possession of which was vital to securing and expanding the bridgehead. Private First Class James was first scout of the lead squad in the assault platoon. The mission of the unit was to seize and secure a group of houses on the edge of town, a foothold from which the unit could launch an attack on the rest of the town. Far out in front,